Welcome to another episode of the Relax Just Love podcast, vegan edition. I have the pleasure to be sitting with Suzana Gartner. She is an animal advocate, author, and retired lawyer. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
It's Friday. It's a beautiful day. It's getting cold, but except for that, it's a beautiful day. So I'm good.
Good. Yeah, well, we're in Canada, so that's what we have to expect this time of year.
But Toronto's never that cold, though. Like compared to,
Yeah.
I'm about an hour and a half north of Montreal.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. It's gonna start snowing soon. There's gonna be a lot of snow soon. So yeah.
You are very brave.
Or very stupid. It really depends.
Definitely brave. Definitely brave. Yeah,
It really depends how you see it.
absolutely. It's all about perspective.
Life is all about perspective, absolutely.
Yes.
So that's one thing I wanted to start with because it is something that I find absolutely amazing. So you were saying that you started the first animals right law firm in Canada.
Yes.
And what where did the idea come from? Why did you decide to do that?
Yeah, so that could have been a crazy idea too. A lot of people question me. It was almost a decade ago. The idea came really before I even went to law school, and it had been brewing in my mind. I had always wanted to help animals, wanted to help the animal rights movement. There just wasn't much in terms of, career or any possibilities at that time. So I started off as a volunteer in an animal shelter, simple as that, walking dogs, grooming the cats, the rabbits, and got to know the staff and like the beautiful stories, the adoptions, but then also the sad stories that were related to the inadequate laws at the time, which still unfortunately in some places exist. And that motivated me to continue on the path. And I decided after I did a Master of Law thesis on animal rights. I was very lucky to be able to write about that. And afterward, just decided to just try it, try an animal law firm and see what happens. I didn't expect it to be full-time work. I was very open-minded, but I was pleasantly surprised to learn that there is a need and there were cases that were meaningful in terms of moving the laws forward.
So what type of, because I know you probably dealt a lot with BSL,
Yes.
considering Ontario, as far as I know, I haven't looked into it in a long time, but as far as I know, Ontario still has BSL in place, right?
Yes, absolutely. So yes, you are absolutely correct. So BSL, so breed-specific legislation, unfortunately, is legislation in Ontario under the Dog Owners Liability Act. They call it DOLA, and it prohibits certain breeds that are substantially similar to the pit bull breed, and they have this criteria. And yes, those were my most passionate meaningful cases to deal with. I'm happy to share that I was able to save quite a few. There were some sad stories too, of course, as such as life. So that is a really important topic that I feel passionate about to move forward as I am now entering advocacy. I don't know yet how I'm going to do that, but I'd like to be involved in this BSL legislation, which really needs to be repealed.
So to put it into layman's term, BSL is really, they define a dog that somewhat looks dangerous as per whatever criteria that they decide and call them dangerous. So basically you cannot have them you cannot have them as pet unless you had them prior to the legislation. And
Yes.
any dogs that is confiscated or that is found is euthanized. They don't keep them into the animal shelters, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, you understand it just as well as I do, more or less. It's based on this criteria where they say substantially similar. So the problem with it really is that there's a huge spectrum of criteria that they decide, the shelters and the Ontario government, that really leaves the door open for a lot of misconception, and then a lot of animals and their humans suffering as a result.
It's the mentality to not blame the individual. That's what I find interesting, is it all comes down, all the problems in society, no matter what you're talking about, always comes down to the individual itself.
Absolutely.
And we tend to not take responsibility, or not put the responsibility on the owner of that responsibility. And if your dog is a dangerous dog, it's because of the owner. 100% its fault. It has
100%.
the kindest dogs. I have German Shepherds, as you know, we were talking about that before.
Yeah, I have a German.
But it's the first time in my life that I have German Shepherds. I'm not a German Shepherds fan.
Oh, really?
No, it's a very interesting
How did you
story.
get German Shepherds?
Okay, you know what? I'll just explain it. You know what psychedelics are?
Of course.
So I'm a big fan of psychedelics. I believe that they are a gate to our subconscious and to elevate ourselves. I don't see them as drugs. I don't see them as recreational drugs whatsoever. Like I don't really drink. I don't drink coffee. I don't smoke weed. I am a very mindful person when it comes to altered state of consciousness.
Cool.
And I had a very big trip of psilocybin mushrooms, and I was alone in my apartment in Montreal back like a couple of years ago, and I had an hallucination of my youngest, of Luana, the black German Shepherd. During my trip, I saw her.
Really?
The day after, I went online and I started looking at dogs, and I found her, so I bought it. I went to get her. Yeah.
That's so cool. So it showed you what
Yep.
was supposed to come into your life.
Absolutely. And then I rescued Lulu, which is the beige one. And
Aww.
I'll probably rescue dogs for the rest of my life. That's one thing I would love to be able to do, is to have a sanctuary for dogs. I'm a big fan of dogs. I love dogs way more than I do humans in general. But I'm a big fan of American Bulldogs. But I lived in Toronto for 4 years, and I had an American Bulldog down there.
Oh, okay.
And they fell under the BSL. I technically had my dogs illegally. I just didn't care, because I love my dogs more than I care about that specific law. To me, it makes no sense.
Did you encounter any problems? Did anyone ever? No.
No, but my first one was a monster. He was like 120 pounds of muscle. His neck was like 28 or 29 inches thick. Like, it was massive, but big baby, big baby. Had not about, you raise your voice at him to punish him for something, he just crawls somewhere. And my ex-wife had a karate school in Oakville, and we would bring him, he was so massive, we could put small t-shirts on him. He would fit in a small, and he just entertained the kids. He was always behind the counter at the dojo. They're beautiful dogs. Blue, I was looking at your Instagram profile earlier. What's going on with Blue?
So I'm really happy to share that Blue was returned to his family, and that's really positive news. Like, for the individuals, that family was really distraught. I actually met them at a protest. There was a BSL protest a couple of weeks ago. I'll post that as well. But it wasn't easy. The dog was seized from essentially their home. So they had I don't know if you're familiar with what happened.
No, not at all.
So it was Vaughn and the owner. I like to call them guardian rather than owner. I can get into that after. But so if I refer to pet parents as guardians, that's the reason, to soften the relationship. But in essence, in the law, they are still owned, right? So that's fine. So he was cooking, and unfortunately, the smoke detector went off. They opened the doors, left the back door open. Blue got out, and right there and then, I don't know how, Vaughan Animal Services seized Blue and wouldn't return him. And it was an uphill battle, but thankfully it ends with a happy story. that's not always how it ends, as you and I both know. And I have to say that from my experience meeting these guardians and their dogs when they're released, I realize how gentle these dogs are. Most of them have never bit anyone.
No.
It's simply due to their appearance, which is just unbelievable, isn't it?
It's pure stupidity. It makes absolutely no sense. Just the fact that they call them pit bulls, which is not even a type of dog. They're Staffordshire, but they're not pit bulls. Pit bulls do not exist. But
That's
yet
right.
they created, they
Yes.
just created a type that any dog that is somewhat muscular, we will fit them into that category. They will fall under the legislation and we can do whatever we want with it. But yet they tend to forget that most of the dog bites happen for small dogs.
Yes. Yes. That's
It it is. I'm such a fan of dogs. It's just
so
I
mine.
don't understand. I don't understand how we can treat them that way and we accept that as citizens, like in Ontario and in Montreal, where I lived for a while, where it was like that too.
Yes.
On the city level, they had an equivalent of a BSL.
Yes, which now has been lifted.
Yes, that it's been lifted by the current mayor. Yeah, absolutely.
That's
But it was still they always take the blame off of the individual and put it on. It's like blaming the spoon for being fat. Like it's but it's the same thing.
I
Like
know. Yes, totally. Yeah. So so some of these dogs were transported to Montreal.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't be returned to their guardians, and just a really sad case in general I can think of, where the family was just so distraught. This dog was an emotional support animal. I have no doubt about it. Did not bite anybody. Again, picked up by animal services, and the guardian ended up moving to Montreal. Because she was so attached. Yep. And there was no way to negotiate a settlement. So that's where I just always say that, unfortunately or fortunately, the laws are very important, because the laws dictate the animal rights movement. And this is definitely one of those really unfortunate, antiquated laws that continues in Ontario.
What if you ever fall into a situation where you do have dogs that needs guardians or that needs shelters, whatever it is, please let me know. That is one thing that is so close to my heart. I cannot understand how we treat dogs. It makes zero sense to me. So anything I can do to help, please let me know. Okay. I would take them here in my place and figure out how to do it later, but I would take them in, absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, so well, I'm moving into this direction now with advocacy years, so I'm sure I'll come up with, some scenarios where, the dogs need to be transported or yeah, absolutely. That's really kind of you.
What was I going to ask? I was going to ask about so she moved from Toronto to Montreal to be with her dog, obviously, which
one of the cases, yeah.
What about kill shelters? Do you guys have a lot of those in Toronto?
Toronto, from what I know, is pretty good. So there is a strong community of advocates, even within the shelter system, that are like you and I, right? So we love the animals, and that's really positive. There's the Toronto Humane Society, which is no kill. The Etobicoke Humane Society, there's no kill. So they've adopted this no kill policy. The municipal services, the pound, right, as you would know it, that is still permitted to kill. Like they still do have kill. I don't know the statistics, right? So that's one of the problems, is the transparency, the accountability. And that's where I go back to the laws. So if the laws changed and updated, then we wouldn't have kill rates.
Let me ask you this: in Canada, are animals considered property, or are they considered sentient beings?
So in Canada as a whole, from what I understand, animals are unfortunately considered property, personal property.
Mm.
So in the same way that the chair that you and I are sitting on. Um, However, the laws are slowly changing. So for example, in Quebec, there is legislation that recognizes animals as sentient beings.
Okay.
That's positive, that's promising. And there are cases that move forward in the courts in which some judges will consider what's called the best interests of the animal. So for
Mm.
example, a couple is divorced, they both want the dog. There are some cases that are coming forward that are considering the feelings of the dog as opposed to regarding the dog as a piece of furniture. So that's positive, but it's not, of course, not going fast enough. And there are changes that need to happen, of course, as a whole.
Nothing ever goes fast enough when you're
No,
talking about cruelty, right? It
absolutely.
never does. Unfortunately, always takes a long
That's
time
right.
to change.
Yes. And sadly, Canada has one of the worst animal protection laws in the world, which is really shocking, I know. And I don't mean,
Seriously.
yeah, and I don't mean to be a downer because I love Canada and love so many people. There's so many people like you and I that absolutely love animals and are advocates, activists. Unfortunately, the laws require updating, and you brought it up, right? The BSL is just one of many examples.
I'm very surprised. I thought we would have been we would have been better than that.
I
It
thought so.
always surprises me how we lack so much compassion towards those animals because most of them have done nothing wrong
Absolutely, yeah.
except for being alive. That's basically
Yes,
their only the only thing wrong they did, it seems, is to be alive. It's
in Canada.
absolutely ludicrous.
Yeah,
Absolutely
yeah,
ludicrous.
it's very sad and it can become overwhelming. So it's really important to just continue and to stay strong and passionate and continue with the advocacy and activism. Like what you're doing is absolutely wonderful. And your podcast will help awaken others and participate in this movement because there's power in numbers.
Absolutely. There's powers in numbers, absolutely. As long as the community that holds those numbers are in accordance, like they agree with each other.
Yes.
Because unfortunately, we see that in the vegan community, we tend to bicker at ourselves, like at each other within the same community. It makes no sense.
Yes, yes, it's really sad, and it's I feel part of the reason that we're perhaps not progressing as quickly as we can. We have to all remember that we're on our own journeys, and we really have to lead by example, which is what you had said to me at the beginning, which I absolutely loved, and I'm gonna put that in my book because I actually really think that's awesome that you said that. It's important for us to realize that people are conditioned from infancy to believe one thing, and it's a process. It's a process for them like it was a process for us, and for us not to be righteous, to be more inclusive in the conversation. Because if we are open to a conversation, then we're open to convincing people, I believe, and what you said, leading by example.
And
That's
not
what I try to do
blaming
in my life.
others, not
Yes.
blaming others either. Not
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. For example, what I like to do is I like to bake these vegan brownies cookies, and I give them to my friends. And I mean, it's just as simple as saying, "Oh yeah, there's no milk, there's no dairy,
yeah.
there's no sugar. It's so healthy," and they love it. And then they become interested. "Oh, Suzana, so how long have you been vegan?" The conversation just starts more naturally. And I personally am a fan of that. I feel more comfortable.
What made you go vegan in the first place? Actually, I didn't ask you.
Oh, that's okay. Well, it was a journey for me as well. So I had been vegetarian, so for many, many years. Probably it's started tapping into it when I was 10 or 11, like really young. I just made that connection. I went to a steakhouse with my parents and they brought out a bloody steak. And I just, in that moment, made that connection. And so I became vegetarian, sort of played around with that, vegetarianism, which at that time was almost unheard of. Never really liked meat in any event, but made that connection. But I didn't make the connection to vegan until later in life because I didn't know. So many of us don't know. I
Yep.
didn't know the cows were mistreated. I didn't know that the veal, the babies are killed. I mean, it was just a shock. So I thought eating cheese and milk was okay
Yeah.
for a long time. And then what happened was I had, young law students come work for me. And slowly I realized, this was way in the very beginning of my practice, what their lifestyle was and why. And as I got to know their stories, I understood and read more and more about the truth. What about
I
you?
haven't ate meat in about 12 years, but I was vegetarian for 8 years before turning vegan.
Okay, so like me.
And to me, I saw Earthlings, the documentary,
Oh yeah, yeah,
and
absolutely.
but they don't talk about the dairy industry. They
No.
talk about the animal portion, and from then it was no animals byproduct, no fur. But it took me a long time to realize that there's no difference with comparing meat to milk products to cheese to anything that is an animal byproduct. There's no difference. It is all,
Absolutely.
they're all obtained in a cruel way. free
Yeah, it
run
all involves suffering.
Free run eggs, there's no such
Oh,
thing.
oh my
That's a
God.
marketing
Oh,
term that is baloney.
absolutely.
Baloney, that's funny actually. But it is so untrue. It is just a marketing term to make something looks good. But I
Yes.
believed it for years, though. For 8 years, I believed it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's brainwashing at its best. And
How
yep.
how about your kids? Are they vegan? How does that work with your
So
kids?
my kids are open to the
Yeah,
conversation, right? So they definitely have vegan meals. So what I
yeah,
really like to make for them are the Beyond
yeah.
burgers, the Impossible. They love that. And so we have the conversation. They love animals, like absolutely love. So we have a rabbit, a little dwarf rabbit in the house. We have a cat and we have two dogs. So they're exposed to animals and they go with me to the rescues when I go for interviews or photos, and it's a journey for them as well. Again, I'm leading by example, and I'm hoping, of course, that's my greatest wish, that is what their future will consist of. And so that's what I do for them.
But you're letting them make their own decisions,
I
basically.
am, yeah, I am letting them make their own decisions. I think it's very important.
I agree. I
Yeah, but
completely agree
in
with you.
my house, like what I serve, what they have outside, I mean, I can't really say for sure, but
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that their consciousness is also rising as they become aware.
You mentioned going to shelters. Do you think it would be beneficial for, let's say, children, like let's say children in primary school or secondary school, to have to volunteers to those places to be? Because I'm always thinking about ways where we could educate the youth, and I know that showing brutal videos might work, might not work. It's like
Yeah,
adults.
yeah.
Maybe for some it will work, for some it will not work. But I'm always trying to think about ways that we can impact them. Do you think that going to shelters, helping out in shelters, would actually help them see how mistreated animals can be? And I'm talking about dog, like an owner can mistreat their dogs and then they get rid of it like it's just a property. Wow, it's too much trouble right now. Let's just give it away and who cares, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. I think that would be so helpful and probably one of the most important things that we as advocates and activists can try to educate the youth, right? The younger generation.
Yep.
And again, it's the experience I find of the humans. So if the child is exposed to the animals and realizes what happens in their mistreatment, then their future can be more promising in terms of animal rights. Absolutely. Yes, yes. I do believe that. Yeah. I mean, you remember even with slaughterhouses, like Paul McCartney had said so long ago, right? If slaughterhouses had glass walls,
Yep.
everybody would be vegetarian, you see? So it's an awakening, I feel, that needs to happen, and absolutely for the youth. Yeah, I think that's a really good idea, actually.
What do you think about the all, because I know in Canada we're very strong on that. The government subsidize the meat industry, the egg industry, the milk industry is consumer do have no idea what it costs. They
No.
have no clue because everything's subsidized. So they always think that a vegan diet is more expensive because unfortunately we pay the real price. Like what we buy is not subsidized. What do you think? Do you think it's a good idea to subsidize vegan food or to stop subsidizing as a whole?
To stop subsidizing like food in general, or
Yeah,
vegan
to
first?
show the real price, what the real price of food is, because right now I had one of my friends, he's not vegan, and he was saying how meat is getting more and more expensive. And I'm
Yes.
like, dude, you have no clue what it costs. It's so subsidized. You have never paid the real price for meat yet.
Oh, so what did you tell your friend that?
Well, it's just we were talking, he's a very clever guy, but we were
Yes.
talking about how much subsidies there is.
Oh,
And
you
he's a
don't
big
know.
fan of no subsidies at all. He believes in free market.
Okay.
So he's
What do
like,
you
I don't
believe?
want subsidies.
Yeah, I'm very uh kind of open to the conversation, but I'm leaning towards this, taking away the subsidies as well. And
Yeah.
well, obviously for the meat industry, and then vegan food, that's something that people really have just no knowledge of, so many, right? And they think it's expensive, like you said. So that's a problem. Again, it's a misconception,
Yeah.
and
It
it's
is
unfortunate.
absolutely.
Yeah,
It
but
is
it is moving
absolutely.
forward. I believe that we are making progress as a
What do you
society.
think is the best way? What
I
do you
think
think is the
that's
best way to do to make
education
progress?
and awareness.
And how do you do that? What do you think is the best way to do that?
Well, one of the ways is what you and I are doing right now, I
Hmm.
believe, right? Having the conversation.
Yeah.
And another way is what you said. I'm taking your ideas away because I really liked them before we spoke, about the individual being convinced that it's good for them.
Yeah.
So it's pretty easy when it comes to veganism, because as you and I both know, Nico, vegan is better for your health, better for the animals, better for the planet. I mean, it just seems so simple. So what I would suggest is that people do their own research. And if the animal suffering doesn't convince you, then perhaps your health will. And you realize that, you know, eating plant-based foods and consuming less meat is a benefit to your health. So there's that part of it that I think can convince people easier, unfortunately, because out of sight, out of mind, unfortunately.
Yeah.
If people don't see the animal suffering, then they just, what I found in my experience is they just don't make that connection for whatever reason.
That's interesting because I've pondered that question many times, and I've always wondered, are people uh into cognitive dissonance where they know what's going on but they don't want to face it?
Yes.
Are they, do they lack the education? I find that hard to believe considering all the videos that are available. This is not 12 years ago when I stopped eating meat. Back then there was one documentary, the first one that came out, Earthlings, and that's it. There was no other videos than that really showing animal cruelty.
Yeah.
But I don't know that, don't you think that people are just scared to change, that they're so scared that other people are going to see them a different way, so they just, you know what, I'll stay the way I am even though I know that the animals, we don't treat them properly? Do you think that's a big factor?
Absolutely, I do. I do think that cognitive dissonance is behind the whole
Yeah.
meat and dairy industry. And in particular, if we're referring to adults, people that are grown up, that have the individual responsibility to make these decisions when they go to the supermarket. For children, I think it's not necessarily cognitive dissonance, because they're still developing. They're still,
Yep.
and again, I'm a mother, so I see it myself. It's a lack of awareness and education. So which again then gets gets really misunderstood for them when they see all these commercials and all this money that's put into promoting the dairy and meat industry. It's unfortunate, right?
I learned about I've never looked into it before, but people were talking about the veganary, I think they call it, the month of January,
Yes,
where you
yes,
go vegan for a month.
yes, yes. That's a
I've
campaign, yeah, that's actually done quite well. And I
yeah,
think it's a really great idea, like to expose people to the idea without having them feel overwhelmed. So I do
because I
promote that, yeah.
I never promoted it before, but for sure I will this year, but or next year, should I say? But I've spoken to a lot of I probably spoken to 700 or 800 vegans in the past month or so. And I always ask them how they became vegan and why they became vegan. And quite often, I surprisingly, that had a lot of impact. A lot of people started with veganary. They just tried it for a month, tried it for a few weeks, and then they're like, wow, I'm going to stick to this because they feel so much better.
Oh, yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's amazing, isn't it? Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. That's wonderful. And it makes sense, right? When you
Yep.
think about it, it can be a little overwhelming with the society that we live in, the
Yep.
restaurants that really are not necessarily conducive to vegan, to start off for the month of January, this veganary. I think that's a great idea. And you're right, people then see how they feel and it's amazing. And then it progresses, I find. And for example, for myself, like my whole lifestyle now is vegan, right? So the hair products, the lipstick that I put on,
Yep.
it's all cruelty free. It's all made sure that there's no animals that are harmed. It's part of my life. But again, that takes a process as well to get there. Like I think of my rabbit, my little dwarf bunny, and I can't even imagine what they do to animals like these rabbits in laboratories. And I mean, I don't want to make anyone feel bad, but it's necessary for people to understand. And again, it was my individual relationship with this rabbit that helped to awaken even an animal rights lawyer, believe it or not. Former, retired.
It's amazing what we're capable as humans. We're capable of the most beautiful act of kindness and love, but we are capable of doing the worst atrocities. We're so in conflict with our own selves. It's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
absolutely amazing that we don't put one and one together.
Yeah, and what's really sad for me, Nico, is the animals are the innocent creatures. Like
Yep.
they really didn't do anything to deserve this. And all they have is their desire to live. They don't have a
Mhm.
right to their life. And that's
Yep.
what makes me very sad because the laws don't allow it, society doesn't allow it. But it really is a problem in terms of humanity's evolution as well, I believe. Because it's that
It
whole idea, when we
breaks my
treat our
heart.
animals, what are we saying about ourselves as a society if we allow this to continue? When we know, like you said, it's cognitive dissonance at this point. How can someone not know what really happens in these slaughterhouses, on these trucks? I mean, it just goes on and on in terms of the cruelty and suffering for the animal.
I don't know that it's possible that people are not aware. That I think they just don't care. Personally, I
I
think
agree.
we're so selfish that we don't care.
I think they turn a blind eye. I really
Yeah.
do. I think they turn a blind eye, and I think it's a lot harder to change and to look within yourself. And so it's easier to just, you know,
Yeah.
turn around and not worry or think about where that meat on the plate came from.
I have a t-shirt done. It says, would you still eat me if you had to kill me?
Yeah.
And this is a question I've been wondering for myself for the better part of 10 years now.
Yeah.
How many people would still eat meat if they had to take the knife, slit that throat open, remove the guts, and start cutting at the flesh? Not a lot of people would eat meat
Not
anymore.
a lot of people, not a lot of people. And that's something that is positive in terms of our campaigns and
Yeah.
our ability to convince people to try vegan go veganish. Just do something. Start with the meatless Mondays. And as you said, you feel better. I mean, I felt a lot better when I stopped eating dairy. My skin cleared up. Like it was just, it was amazing how much better I felt. And for other people, I feel that there's just so many opportunities now to try to go vegan, that there really is no excuse. But we as vegans, as we're part of this, right? This is our passion and our goal. I believe we have to be more sympathetic.
Yeah, more sympathetic and compassionate to others that have questions, that are curious, that
Yes,
are plant-based or plant curious or vegan curious, as they call them.
yes, yes, I agree with that completely.
Do you know a guy named Doug McNish? He's a chef in Toronto. Do you know him?
I don't know him personally, but I know him through, we follow each other on Instagram, I believe. And I've seen some of his cool recipes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does he have a restaurant?
That's a good question. I'm gonna record a
Okay.
podcast with him in the next couple of
Oh,
weeks.
okay, cool. Yeah, I'll have to reach out to him and check it out if it is. But yeah, he's a positive force for sure.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
And his food
yeah.
looks amazing. His
It looks
food looks
amazing.
ridiculously good. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks so good. It looks so good.
But
Yes.
if you try it, let me know, because
I
if I
will.
was in Toronto, for sure I would order some of his food. I'd really want to try it.
Okay, yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah, I will. Yeah, there are a lot on the positive front. There are a lot of really delicious vegan restaurants, vegan options. I mean, so many of us were doing Uber Eats, but it really is so simple to try veganism and see how you feel. And the options are just endless. What's it like in Montreal, or where I guess
Montreal's great. We
yeah.
probably, I think last time I checked, top 10 best restaurants in Canada are 3 or 4 of them are in Montreal.
Amazing.
Oh yeah, the food, and like I've been vegetarian and vegan for a while now, and how many times have I gone to restaurants and I'm like, I'm vegan, they don't have an option, but they're gonna, you give a challenge to the chef, just do me something, and they always do. I've never had a problem. I'm not a big fan of Montreal as the city, because I don't like the way the mayor is taking care of it, but as a restaurant, as a place to go, it's a party town, right? It's a
Yeah.
university town. There's like 3 or 4 universities in Montreal.
Oh wow.
The food scene there is ridiculously good. So many vegan restaurants now. It's absolutely beautiful. You don't have any reasons not to be vegan when you live in a first world country like Canada, for example.
Oh yeah. And that's a really good point that you make.
Yeah.
And I do that as a rule. I don't change reservations necessarily if people want to go to the restaurant that they choose. And if they choose to order meat, that is their choice again. But I do exactly what you do, is I will always stand up for myself and voice my concern for the menu. I do that because I think it's important. And they are always accommodating.
Yep.
Like you, I've never had an experience where the kitchen won't make a vegan meal, but sometimes we have to ask.
Oh, absolutely. Sometimes it's not
And
on the
that's
menu.
okay.
You ask, and there's always something they can do to adapt.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's important. And that awakens them as well. The more of us do that,
Absolutely.
the more possibility there will be a vegan dish on their menu.
If there's a demand for it, like, let's not lie to each other that most companies that do vegan products really care about the animals. They probably don't. They care about their bottom line.
Of course.
They want to make money. So
Of
they do
course.
products that's in demand. So if you demand vegan products and you boycott places that do not have them, I guarantee you that they will start having vegan products wherever you go.
Oh yeah. It's all about supply and demand.
Yeah, they only care about their money. At the end of the day, it's a business. They want to make more profit.
Yes.
If people are not buying from them, they'll create the product that people want.
Yes, absolutely.
We've been going for almost 45 minutes, but I
Oh,
gotta
have
ask
we?
you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Cool. This has
I
been
gotta
fun.
ask you, I gotta ask you a question. I always ask the same question to everyone I
Sure.
speak to. If you had a chance to speak to your 14-year-old self, what would you tell her?
Well, that's such a nice question. I'm gonna cry. That is so sweet. Oh my gosh, that's so sweet, Nico. I would tell her that she understood at a really young age, and that self-compassion would have been great, because there were so many people along the way that made fun of her and made it difficult for her to carve this route, this journey. But tap on the shoulder, in the end it worked out okay. So
I think the hardest kind of love is self-love.
self-love, yeah, yeah.
It is the
That's a
hardest kind of
great
love.
question. I love that. Oh my gosh, that is
Oh,
so.
one of the things I'd like to do in the future is encourage people to record in their cell phone on the camera, like they were
Oh,
talking to that person. I've done the exercise.
amazing. Oh, sorry, my Lily just came. Do you see my German Shepherd? Come.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
There she is. She's looking for me. Are you
I,
interrupting the podcast? I closed the
I have
door.
to
See how smart they are? She opened the door.
I have to close mine, or else they would try to be in here.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
There
it's
she is. She's gone now.
oh,
Yeah.
it's
So
okay.
I think that's wonderful. Yeah. It's this self-compassion and
Yeah.
compassion for others as well, right? So we have, I think, a responsibility and duty to be compassionate to others along their way. I've learned as well to be patient with others. Like, I want everybody to know what I know today, and I've realized it's not possible. You see, I'm shocked when I go to a restaurant and I see people ordering veal. I can't even, I mean, every animal, forget just the veal, but do they know this is a baby? And does the baby's life take any factor in their 2-minute meal? If you know what I mean. It's shocking to me.
If you look just the way milk is produced,
Oh, it's just,
most people don't realize that in order
no.
for the cow to give milk, she needs to repeatedly, one after the other, give birth.
Yeah.
And every single time, normally when it's a male, it gets killed. They get separated. The male doesn't survive. But have you ever seen a cow trying to reach for his baby? There's no difference between a mother and their children, humans and animals. There's no difference. You see them cry, you see them scream, you see them try to go over that fence to go get their children. It's absolutely brutal. I
Yeah.
have no idea how. I'm a very sensitive person when it comes to that, and I don't understand how that's still acceptable in today's society. I really don't get it.
It goes back to cognitive dissonance, and
Yeah,
also this disconnect between the other animals and, for example, your dog.
yeah.
uh, that's so common, and it's so unfortunate, because you and I and the viewers, I'm sure we all know that that cow has equal feelings to my dog that's lying here. But the right is just completely swayed. Like, it's not fair at all, because people don't have that connection, I believe. So another part of education that I think would be helpful is what you had said, the shelters, and also taking children to sanctuaries and
Yeah.
having school trips. I've tried to do that actually for my schools, and I'm happy that I was able to, being a parent and exposing children to meet those animals firsthand, to realize that that pig has the same feelings and ability to suffer and love as their family dog. That's where I think, when people start making that connection, that things can change for the better.
Yeah, those zoos needs to stop too.
Oh, absolutely. They need to.
That is one thing that drives me nuts, are
Yes.
zoos.
So I would say, don't go to zoos, don't
Yeah,
support them.
no,
Zoos are not doing very well, as we know, and
no.
circuses. I mean, there's a circus now, I've heard, that's going to run without animals, and that's all due to pressure from us,
Mhm.
the activists, the advocates. We just have to keep saying our message, and eventually it gets heard. I go back to the beginning of our conversation when we talked about Blue, the dog. I
Yep.
believe that the voices of the guardians and the voices of the community that formed put pressure on the shelter,
Yep.
let him go. And I would say the same is for the movement itself. And so we just have to keep going strong. And you
We
do what
hold
you're
so
doing.
much power.
Yes.
We hold so much power in numbers, but for some reason people are scared
They're
to take
scared.
back their power.
Yes, yes. And I mean, I do a lot of posting on Instagram. I like to do it in a positive way where I like to feature animal rescues and sanctuaries and promote them because they need all the help they can get. Most people don't know, or maybe some people do know, that they're privately run. They're run on charity. They don't get government subsidies.
Yeah.
So I'd love for the followers to go on my page, Suzana Gartner, and or my other page is Animal Law Advocacy, where we post positive, progressive animal rights stories. I like to lift people up because there's so much, so much bad stuff that happens. And if we keep moving forward in a positive direction, then we can have more people on our side, which is what we need, right? The masses.
I agree with you 100%. I think it's the perfect way to end this too.
Yes.
I really want to thank you for reaching out and taking the time to do this. I really enjoyed our conversation, and hopefully it is the first of many. I got a feeling we'll collaborate on quite a few things together.
I think so too. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I've enjoyed every minute of it and love what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Take care.